All right. I'm with Yaakov Katz, everybody. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome. Thank you for coming.
It's great to be with you.
I'm really excited to talk to you because you have a new book out, While Israel Slept, and everybody should go buy it right now or after this podcast. It is all about how Hamas surprised the most powerful military in the Middle East. And I think that was the number one question everybody had post October 7th was, how did this happen? And you've gone into great journalistic detail in this book. It's really well written too. It's like quite a page turner, actually. How is writing this for you?
It was difficult, if I could say
I would
that.
imagine. Yeah.
This was a book, and it's not my first book, but it was a
Yeah.
book that really, to write it while the war is still going on, and to do it when the country Israel, where I live, is still so much in pain and still so much in trauma, and to talk to people who are either still in their positions or have been dismissed or have stepped down under a cloud of a great loss of trust and confidence in their capabilities because they failed on that day of October 7th, 2023, when the Hamas attack took place. Like that carries with it an emotional baggage that you don't have, I would say, in other stories that you work on, especially even if they have to do with pain or suffering, but they're usually in the history, so it's something that's distant from you. But this one is so still real and raw, and that carried with it some difficulty, beyond just the regular journalistic complexity of getting people to talk and convincing them that it's in their interest to share their version and share their story with us, which is always a challenge, especially when it's a story that some people don't look good in.
Yeah, one thing that really strikes me is that the military seems to be taking quite a bit of responsibility and they're holding themselves accountable. And I don't see that as much with government. Is that just the way it always is? I feel like the government saying, "Hey, we messed up. We missed this too," would maybe go. Would it make any difference at all? That was something that just really struck me reading the book.
Oh no, I mean, you're 100% right. This is I think one of the big problems of what's happened, right? The military, and I think this has to do also with, look, I don't want to speak negatively necessarily about the government in general, right? We could talk about government officials specifically if you'd like, but politicians are politicians, and
Right.
people who are in uniform, I think they tend to hold themselves to a higher standard of values and
Mm.
principles. And when you fail in the military, there's a price to be paid, right? This is a very hierarchical system. It's one with great discipline and rules and laws. And it could be you make a mistake, you pay with your career, right? Something that is even much smaller. Of course, even more so if you were in one of those key roles on October 7th, that you missed the intelligence or you weren't effective in preventing the Hamas invasion when it was taking place, or your response was lagging and was not effective. And you're 100% right, is that when you look at Israel today, now almost 2 years since the attack, and during this 2-year war, the entire military command within the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, has been purged. The chief of staff has stepped down. The head of the Southern Command, that's that region in charge of the Gaza Strip in southern Israel, he stepped down. The head of the Gaza Division in charge of operations in Gaza, he stepped down. The head of the military intelligence, I could keep on going and going. But in government, no one.
No one.
Not a one.
Yeah, it seems like that would, at least a couple of people losing their positions would maybe help rebuild some trust with the citizenship, but that's just me. It feels like someone should be held accountable for that giant mistake. One of the there's so much I want to talk to you about because it was interesting watching what happened in America post October 7th, and disturbing too. And obviously, I'm going to just lead with this question because I think it will it's on people's minds always, and I'm sure you've received it before. Actually, I know you've received it. Is there any evidence that this was some inside job? Because this is where everybody goes, because Israel was at this point of almost on the brink of a civil war. Bibi was kind of fighting for his survival. There's this idea that everybody just let this slide. It was an inside job so that it would unite the country, and Bibi could stay in power, and the end. I mean, I know you've heard this. You're not a stranger to it.
No, I mean, but I totally get the question, Bridget, because I think that people are so confused. How is it possible that something like this could happen to the state of Israel? Because also, I mean, let's just zoom out for 1 second, if you allow me. Like the state of Israel, I think when people think about it, and people who don't know Israel too well, and maybe have never been there and are familiar with with what goes on there, but Israel is a country whose name is almost synonymous with conflict and war. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
I think it's tragic, but that's the reality. So if you're an average American, man or woman, and you see a story about Israel, most likely it's going to have to do with some sort of war, some sort of operations, or some sort of either Israel's attacked or Israel's attacking somewhere. Like that's just the reality. And therefore, you can't say that Israel is a country that's not vigilant when it comes to its military threats, and it's not aware of this reality. It's hyper vigilant. It always has been. I mean, it's fought wars every decade since inception. 48, 56, 67, 73, 82, and I could go on and on. So this has always been there. So the question really is compounded by, for a country so vigilant and so aware, how did it miss this so in such a serious way? And I think that therefore people say, okay, there must be some rational explanation. Somebody pressed a button somewhere. Someone turned off a camera somewhere. I mean, obviously there would have been a lot of cameras shut off and a lot of buttons pressed,
Right.
but it leads people, I think, to try to look for that type of rationalization. I don't see any of that anywhere. We haven't seen any of that evidence. And what I do think, though, just seriously happened, and this is the story that we tell in the book, is Israel over time, for a number of reasons which we could get into, decided to adopt what we call the policy of containment. And it decided to create this policy vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip and Hamas, that it can keep Hamas in Gaza. It can buy them off with money. It can give them some economic incentives. Occasionally, if needed, and there is going to be some sort of conflict because they do something or we do something, okay, a few days or a few weeks at the most, almost always exclusively just Israel, the Israeli Air Force, never even really sending ground forces in, because what's the point? We're never going to topple them. It's not worth the price. So just keep them where they are. We are where we are, and we kind of live. And I'll use a terrible metaphor, but you'll allow me for a moment. We had a prime minister, and now he wants to run again for prime minister, Naftali Bennett, who for a brief period replaced Benjamin Netanyahu between 2021 and 2022 as the prime minister. And he had this terrible line that he said back in 2012 when he first ran for the Israeli parliament. He was asked about the Palestinian conflict, and he's a more hardline right winger than Netanyahu even. And he said, look, the Palestinians are similar to this friend of mine. I have a friend from the army who got wounded in an operation, and a piece of shrapnel got stuck in his rear end. And the shrapnel's still there because they decided it wasn't worth removing. And sometimes when it's cold outside, it hurts a little. But when it's warm outside, it doesn't hurt. And it depends on the weather. And what he was trying to say was, it's something that you just have to live with. And occasionally it'll hurt and you'll deal with it. And sometimes, most of the time, it won't bother you and you'll just keep going. So that's a bad analogy. I don't like it too much, but it does set give some insight to the mindset of how all Israelis, really, everyone was looking at this.
Yeah, because they got out in 2005, right? I mean, I don't even think most people, the history of Israel is so insane to even try and, it's like, where do you want to start? Do you want to
Yeah.
start do we start at the beginning? Like in 70? Do we start? It's just like so crazy to me
We
how
start in Genesis, right? We start back
start in
then.
Genesis? And then you're like, oh, okay. So here's the map. You're showing me all these different maps of like, here's the map from that they drew. And it's like this. And then they said no to this. And then here's the map. And then here's the like, it looks like a gerrymandered state in the United States, like you're like, this is it's so insane. And I don't think it it gets so complicated because you're like, okay, well, why did they leave in 2005? So Israel leaves in 2005. Now you have the Palestinians, they have their what do they call it? What is Gaza called?
Well, Gaza, I mean, the Palestinians back already in 1993, you'll remember. I'm
This
sorry to
is
jump back there. I know you're trying to start at 2005,
you're
but
like, no, we need to go back.
I got to go back to 93. In
We probably
1993,
should go back to 48.
right? No, I'm not
Yeah,
going to go that far back. In 1993, Israel and the Palestinian Authority signed a deal called the Oslo Accords. It was actually
right.
signed at the White House. Bill Clinton, famous photo, Bill Clinton, Yasser Arafat, the PLO leader on one side, Yitzhak Rabin, the Israeli prime minister, who sadly, tragically is killed a couple years later. They signed a peace deal. It's meant to initiate a process that will ultimately lead and culminate in the establishment of a Palestinian state, part in the West Bank and in Gaza. So
This is a
creating
two-state solution.
Correct. And creating some sort of continuity between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, because right now they're not necessarily territorially connected.
But they don't even in the West Bank, it seems like they don't even want to go to Gaza.
No, they don't want to go to Gaza. No. So what ends up happening, though, is that in 2005, when Israel pulls out of Gaza, it hands over the keys to Gaza. So Israel had military positions. It had settlements there. It had about 8,000, 9,000, what's so-called settlers, residents who lived there since the early 70s. Pulls them out, disengages, as it's called, from Gaza, and hands the keys over to the Palestinian Authority and says, listen, we're going out to the international border. We're not having even one soldier left inside. It's yours. Do something with it, right? What ends up happening is that was in the summer of 05. By January of 06, elections are held in the Palestinian territories for their parliament, and Hamas wins the elections. Hamas now has a prime minister. So Hamas is perceived by the average Palestinian, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank, as having succeeded in using terrorism to evict these so-called Israeli occupiers from the Gaza Strip. So that bolsters and boosts dramatically its popularity in the Palestinian street. And then in the summer of 2007, so things kind of carry on as usual. And then in the summer of 2007, I remember like yesterday, because I was then just a regular beat reporter at the Jerusalem Post. I was covering the military beat. And we wake up one day, and it was in the middle of June, and suddenly Hamas is shooting at the Palestinian Authority guys. They're throwing them off the top of buildings. A group of them are running to the border, begging Israel to let them through. And Israel eventually does let some of them through. But effectively, the Palestinian Authority, so the organization with which Israel signed that peace deal back in 1993, is evicted from the Gaza Strip. And now it is Hamas land. This is only Hamas territory. And with Hamas, we don't have a deal. Hamas is a terrorist group. Hamas continues to attack us even throughout this period. So suddenly, what the Gaza Strip becomes, it's never an official state. It never receives statehood as its own, but effectively, de facto, it is a piece of territory, not big, but not too small, with about 2 million people, controlled by a genocidal terrorist organization.
Right. And then the West Bank is as well?
So the West Bank, even during this period, so you go from like 07 until now, so 20 years almost, Gaza run by Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, the guys we signed that deal with, who we get along with for the most part in the West Bank, have to work with all the time, every day, because in the West Bank, you're much more stuck together. Meshed in there because you have Israeli communities, you have the Palestinians. Sometimes they're right one next to the other, driving on the same roads, working in the same industrial zones together, coordinating military and security operations together. So there's a lot of coordination. Gaza, though, cut off from Israel and cut off from the Palestinian Authority. They don't even go there. So
Right.
very much you have a situation where in this tiny little sliver piece of land called the land of Israel, if we want to call it that, you have three entities that are pretty much
Right.
running some portion of this land.
And so the Palestinian Authority is still in charge in the West Bank.
Correct. Although
Okay.
Israel does retain, and this has always been the big difference, Israel retains security, independence, and operational freedom in the West Bank. So if it's all these years, if it's so, while it doesn't go often into the Palestinian cities, Ramallah, Jenin, Jericho, Nablus, some names people might be familiar with, but if it does have intelligence of something happening there, it goes in. Gaza, on the other hand, all these years, it watched from afar as
Got
Hamas
it.
amassed rockets, dug tunnels, trained out in the open, but it never went in to stop them in their tracks. It allowed that buildup to keep going and going and going.
When one of the questions I was gonna ask is when they were getting all this money from Qatar and $30 million a year,
A
this
month.
contain a month. Holy shit, a month. Um, I always forget that it's a month. Um, when they're getting this, no one in Israel is going, "What are they doing with all that money?" Like, it didn't occur. Did they know they were building this tunnel system?
You know, I have to tell you, and we write this in the book. I got my hands on one point on a PowerPoint presentation that the Israeli, excuse me, the Israel Security Agency, known as the Shin Bet, whose one job is to track, monitor, and confront and undermine Palestinian terrorist activities and basically Hamas. And I got my hands on a PowerPoint presentation that they had prepared about a year and a half before October 7th. And it goes through what Hamas is and what Hamas does. And also then it has a couple of slides on Hamas's budget, financial budget. And the numbers didn't add up. And I'm looking at this thing and it lowballs it at just like, 150, $200 million. And it's like, this doesn't make sense. We know that they're getting $30 million a month in suitcases of cash from Qatar. So that comes out to, I'm not so good at math, but that's $360 million a year, right? I
Right.
mean, that's a lot of money right there. That's more than what they're saying is Hamas's annual budget. And I'm looking at this and I'm trying to understand how this makes sense. So I go meet with the former Shin Bet guy who I know well, and I say, explain to me what this is. And he goes through the presentation, which he's very familiar with. And he says to me, well, you got to remember, we're looking here just at the terrorist military wing budget. But, tunnels? No. That's a different budget line. And the fortifications, that's a different budget line. Like, I don't understand. All of Hamas as a group is a terrorist organization. What does that mean? So Israel was telling itself stories in a way that it was even like budget lining and separating how Hamas was using. So if it was digging tunnels, well, are the tunnels for terrorist activity? Are they not for terrorist activity? I mean, the state of mind was so off and so deep that it
Yeah.
really penetrated into every way that Israel watched and looked at this.
Wouldn't they be wondering why things aren't getting remarkably better for society there? Like, shouldn't they have had tourism and, like beautiful beachside resorts and restaurants and
No, you're
stuff?
you're 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 100% right. I mean, this is a group that was getting billions of dollars a year, some of it from the Palestinian Authority, which continued to send money to Gaza to pay for salaries and to keep the place going. Their fuel issues, water issues. So the Palestinian Authority, as while it tried to still keep some ties and linkage to Gaza, it kept on paying those big bills. It got tons of money from smuggling of goods that went across the border, under the border with Egypt into Gaza, because Gaza also has a border with Egypt. So it's making a ton of
People
money that
people
way.
always forget that.
Yeah, it's like a convenient fact that people forget. By the way, it's a very long border also,
It's
right? Yeah,
massive
yeah,
too.
yeah,
That is one of the most terrifying walls in all of the world, I think. It's
yeah.
crazy.
Which, by the way, the Egyptians have built, right? The
Yeah.
Egyptians built this wall because they don't want any of the Palestinians coming into Egypt. Um, But you're 100% right. I mean, all this money going there, and Gaza looks like a hellhole. I mean, this
Yeah.
is before the war. No real industry, no development, no real economic horizon, unemployment always high in the high 50s or 60% tiles. Young men not able to get a job. I mean, really no future for people there
And
unless
this is
you're
sorry, go on.
connected, unless the only future, and this is why Hamas did this, is if you connect yourself to Hamas, then you have a future.
Right. This and it gives it gives it the optics of it lend to the kind of credibility of the people who would call this an open air prison or whatever the term is that, like you said, it looks like a hellhole. And I guess this is because Israel is oppressing this whole whatever part of whatever you call it. What do we call this? I still don't even know what to call it.
Territory, strip,
Territory?
the Gaza Strip. I mean, look, this is always the chicken egg question to some extent, right? And I have this. I've been having this conversation with people for 25 years now,
Yeah.
and definitely since we pulled out of Gaza the last 20 years. Of and I was there on the ground for that month of the pullout and covering it, and it was heartbreaking to see. But there was also it was a feeling of hope that here, Israel's pulling out its military, it's pulling out its residents. It didn't make sense that we had 9,000 Jews living among 2 million Palestinians. It didn't make sense. And now there's an opportunity. Go do something with this. I mean, like turn
Uh-huh.
this into the Singapore of the Middle East, right?
Uh-huh.
Make something with it. And Israel left behind hat houses. It had developed the Jews who had lived there had developed hydro agriculture or something or other. They were growing tomatoes and lettuce and water. It was like
And
some of the best
flowers.
flowers and other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not good into the agriculture language, but they were doing some like amazingly advanced stuff there. And they left all that behind, and none of it was ever used. It was just instead of growing flowers or tomatoes, it was used to grow rockets and IEDs and roadside bombs. I mean, that's what it turned
Mhm.
into. But the issue, the question that people always say is, okay, it's because it's this open air prison, right? It's because Israel controls and occupies. Well, first of all, and we just mentioned this, they have a border with Egypt, right? This idea that Israel has some responsibility towards a piece of land where an entity that wants to destroy it is in control, and we have to give them water and electricity and fuel and supplies. They could get it from Egypt, guys. I mean, with all due respect, that's one. Two is, maybe Israel has responsibility, but shouldn't they stop the terrorism? And then people say, well, you should stop the occupation. So you go, it's like a ping pong match, right?
Right.
Stop the occupation, stop the terrorism, and you'll never win that way. And it's just, it gets you stuck into this
But you
cycle.
did stop the occupation in the sense that there's no more Israeli troops there. Well, pre-war, there
Right.
wasn't any Israeli troops living there.
No, and
So do they mean the occupation just that
no, they
there's
mean
a
the
border?
general occupation. You have the occupation in the West Bank, they'll say. You have settlements that are still there. You have settlers who are, creating violence and attacking Palestinians in the West Bank, which unfortunately happens a very small number, but they would always find a different excuse for why Hamas was legitimate or justified in its armed struggle against Israel. And I think that what people, kind of the way I look at it, and yes, I'm Jewish and I've been living in Israel for 32 years now, so I'm biased. But I do look at it as, let's look at Israel's history and let's look at Hamas's history. Israel's history is one that it's fought many wars, but it's made peace deals with Egypt, with Jordan. It's negotiated with Syria. It's negotiated with the Palestinians. It has peace and normalization with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco. It's trying to do that with Saudi Arabia. Who has Hamas made peace with? Absolutely no one. And in each of these peace treaties that Israel has made, it's also paid a price for because it values peace. So when we
Mhm.
talk about this idea, maybe if Hamas just stopped attacking us, maybe there would be peace. I mean, I know that sounds very simple, but maybe it is that simple.
Yeah. Are you dealing with an HMO like I am? It's such a pain in the butt. If I want to get any sort of testing done to ensure I'm making my health a priority, I have to wait weeks for an appointment to see my doctor, then get a referral from her and wait weeks more for an appointment with the specialist I needed to see just to get some lab work. Quest simplifies this process. I can purchase my own lab tests online and test for a multitude of health issues I might be concerned about, then take those results to my doctor better armed with the information I need. At questhealth.com, you can get hundreds of tests across several different categories, from allergies to heart health, hormones, sexual health, women's health tests for egg quantity, perimenopause, menopause, men's health tests for testosterone, prostate, and so much more. These are lab quality tests, the same ones you'd be given at your doctor's office. So prioritize your health and visit questhealth.com today. Use the code Phetasy to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use the code Phetasy for 25% off. The West Bank is more complex, I think.
Yes.
You seem like someone who's pretty, even though obviously you say you're biased, you seem like you're someone who is able to criticize Israel for things that it does wrong. What are your biggest critiques of Israel?
I'm able to, and I enjoy it at times as well. I'll be honest. But I mean, I do it because I also always want to see my country do better. And I think that
Right.
the job of journalists also is, we're not there to be cheerleaders. We're there
Mhm.
to put us, shine a flashlight or put a spotlight onto a problem and get leaders to fix them. So definitely I've seen my career over 25 years now of, this is what I'm supposed to do, is to try to find those issues and lead people to ask questions and hopefully demand of our leadership to fix things. I mean, I'll tell you where my biggest criticism has always been is that we don't make big decisions.
Mm.
We have, I think, sanctified to some extent. I don't know, that's probably not the right word, but we have like put up on a pedestal this idea of a status quo. And for many, many years, the Palestinian conflict has been there, right? It's not new. And yes, we tried the Oslo Accord and then that failed, and we tried the disengagement from Gaza and then that failed. But I'll take you back. I mean, when we pulled out of Gaza in 2005, already in 2006, we went back in for an operation. But we pulled out again. Then in 2008, we went back in for operation, pulled out. Then 2012, pulled out. 2014, and at no point did anyone say, hold on, we're doing this every year and a half or 2 years. Maybe let's think of something new to do, some other way of doing this. Like, is there another alternative? The same applies to the West Bank. We've been doing, everyone talks about the same ideas: two-state solution, one-state solution. We're not moving towards the two-state solution. And a one-state solution is the end of the Jewish state of Israel, because it's the end of the Jewish majority in the state of Israel ultimately. Well, maybe not today, but demographically speaking, that's where we're going to go.
Yeah.
So if we want to keep this a state that is the Jewish state of Israel, and I know people have issues with that as well, I would like it to stay that way, then we need to find a way to disconnect and disengage from the Palestinians in the West Bank, give them some political horizon, path to self-determination, independence in one way or another. But we don't do that either. And there's things that we could do to help beef them and bolster them and beef them up. And we don't do that. So and I see this in many different places. I could talk to you internally within Israel. I'll give you two quick examples. Back in 1948, when Israel was established, David Ben-Gurion, who's our version of George Washington, right, our founding father, and our first prime minister, was approached by ultra-Orthodox rabbis. So these are the Jews who wear the black hats, beards, long black coats. I know if you're from New York originally, so people know the Hasidim. So these are like the Hasidic Jews. They get approached and they asked Ben-Gurion, they said, listen, we have these people who sit in yeshivas, which are these higher academies of Jewish studies. Let them be exempt from the army. You don't really need them. It's good that they can study. It's important.
Look at them. They
Right.
can't fight.
They can't fight. They're too frail, and they've been sitting at reading books for too long. But let them have an exemption. And Ben-Gurion gave it to them. Back then it was 400 students.
Right.
Today, 60,000 have the exemption. Right. So they don't serve.
Like a conflict.
That's right. And we're in a war where we don't have enough soldiers. That's an issue that needs to be dealt with. And right now it's causing great division in Israeli society. Then there's the Israeli Arabs. Out of 10 million Israeli citizens, 2.3 million are Arabs. They're citizens just like myself, same rights, but they don't serve in the military for the obvious reason, because they also have a Palestinian identity of sorts. Now, there were fears back years ago, and they came true, that during a big war, the Israeli Arabs within Israel, so those Arab citizens, would rise up and violently, potentially rise up against the state of Israel. It happened during a short operation against Hamas in 2021. There were riots in mixed cities. There were lynching of Jews, and then there were Jewish retaliation against the Arabs. It was terrible. And the feeling was that in a future war, it's going to be all over the country. And here's what
Mm.
I say. We've been in this war now for almost 2 years. I have not seen one riot. I have not seen one lynching. I have not seen one blocking of road by these 2.2, 2.3 million Arabs. So that tells me, hold on, there's an opportunity here to do something big, to integrate them, this minority, even more into our country. Why are we not doing that? Why are we not reaching out as a government and trying to do more integration, more coexistence? Before the Palestinians, let's do it within our own country. And I don't have a good answer why it's not happening. So back to your question of where do I think we make the biggest mistake? It's missing these opportunities. It's not making decisions that can literally change the reality for this country.
What how are they not fully integrated? Are they
No, they are, at the end of the day, they're a minority. Like every country, there's always going to be issues with minorities. There is discrimination, like in every country, there's discrimination against
right?
minorities. I think the United States, sadly, also knows this well. Um, they don't feel part and parcel always with the state of Israel. The state of Israel its characteristics are a Jewish state. Now, other religions are here to coexist, but more can be done to make them feel that they of a sense of equality, and a sense that they are recognized and they are seen, and that budgets are given to them. I mean, for years, like many minorities, I was born and raised in Chicago. The south side of Chicago, you didn't go near, right?
Mhm.
It was neglected. It was dangerous. You don't want to go near that part of town. So we have parts of Israel that are like that too. But this is an opportunity to invest and put money in there, fix up the infrastructure, improve the schools, get more of them into the workforce. I mean, this is a good thing for the future of Israel. And ultimately, I think what we've seen over the last 2 years is that they feel part of Israel. Otherwise,
Mhm.
they would be rising up against the country, but they're not, because they believe, I think, and studies do show this, that Hamas is to blame for this war,
Right.
and they don't stand with Hamas.
Right. Yeah, one of the other questions I have that I have yet to hear a good answer for. Well, I've heard some good answers for it actually at this point, but I would like to hear your answer. Is why aren't they allowing journalists into Gaza?
Yeah, I mean,
Even
it's
like yourself.
well, I've been to Gaza many times, but it's always with the military, right? So the
Right.
military will allow journalists into Gaza, but they have to go accompanied by the
Embedded.
IDF, right?
Right.
And they have to be embedded. And then the IDF controls what you see and takes you to where they want to take you. And you're limited in what you're able to report on and who you're able to talk to. And when you're with the IDF, also, let's keep in mind, you're not talking to the Palestinian on the street, right? Because the IDF isn't going so close to the average Palestinian, and the average Palestinian doesn't want to be anywhere near the IDF. So you're very limited in what you're able to see. There are people around the world who want to portray this decision as if it's Israel trying to silence or to hide what it's doing there. I don't think that's the case. And there's tons of media that's already there, Palestinian media. Uh, Unfortunately, some of them get caught in the crossfire, and there's been tragic instances of where journalists have been killed. There was a very regretful attack that the Israeli troops launched 2 shells at a hospital called the Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza a couple weeks ago and killed a number of journalists. It makes no sense why that was done. And, there's an investigation that's ongoing. But unfortunately, in war, mistakes do happen in the fog of war. But with that said, I think what Israel's argument is, look, if we let you in, we can't guarantee your safety. And
Yeah.
therefore, some journalist from NBC or CNN or CBS or the New York Times or whoever it is who goes in there, and then something, God forbid, happens to him. I mean, what are they going to say? No, we knew that we were putting our lives at risk. or are they going to blame the Israelis? So Israel says very simply, we'd rather take the hit now on our public image, and people want to make accusations that we're trying to hide things, than accidentally kill a BBC, Sky News, Fox News, NBC, New York Times, Wall Street Journal reporter.
I mean, don't you think people would say the reason that hospital was bombed was to take out the journalists?
Of course,
Like,
people
what?
will say that. Yeah, of course, people will say that, but that's not the case. I mean, Israel is not. We are a democracy. We are a
Mhm.
country that we can stand up as journalists, and I can write as much as I want against the government and critique the government. And you have journalists and newspapers that are parroting a lot of what we see in the international media about Israel, claims of war crimes and genocide and starvation, right? We have very left-wing media. We have very right-wing media. I mean,
Mhm.
we're like any other normal country out there today.
Yeah.
And therefore, I don't think it's an attempt to hide or to shy away from criticism, but really it's an attempt to avoid very difficult situations that could easily evolve if those journalists are in Gaza and God forbid something happens to them.
The idea of containment's really interesting to me because I know a lot of people they would say, "Oh, we think that they're just gonna they like the money, they're taking the money. This is." Can you explain this idea a little bit? I have a lot of thoughts on this because I don't actually at first I thought it was maybe West-splaining a little bit, like applying the Western mindset to I do think this is what it is. You're applying this Western mindset to a completely different ideology and, just the 2 things aren't even the same, but I don't really there's so much and this is something that you touched on in your talk the last night. There's no reason to think that they wouldn't be open to this because so much of the Middle East actually has been open to being westernized to a certain extent and opening itself up to engaging in capitalism, and so I would like to hear your thoughts on this and just explain what containment is for the audience.
Well, I appreciate the question because I really think it is probably one of the most important question ultimately when it comes to Gaza and what went wrong. And this is also what we tried to kind of detail and explain in the book, with the purpose to some extent or the intent of by explaining and explaining how is the policy of containment even invented, how is it incubated and cultivated over time, and then how is it adopted, and how it overtakes thinking that really should be so obvious what you're seeing, but instead you tell yourself a different story. You start to believe in fairy tales, and that's something that we all have to be concerned about, because this can happen again to Israel, and it could happen to other places around the world. So I
I'm
think it's a very important lesson.
Yeah, I think the West is experiencing a bit of conceptia itself in general, but keep going.
Yeah, no, I think 100%. So the containment policy for Gaza was one that Israel, and we spoke a bit about this, pulls out in '05, gets into this cycle of every 2 years or so, another ground operation or aerial operation or whack-a-mole operation, whatever you want to call it. And the prime minister, who was then also Netanyahu, says, this is not working, right? It doesn't make sense. And he doesn't want to go into Gaza in a big way and bring down Hamas and get stuck in there in a long war. And look how long this war has been. And even writes, for example, in his biography that came out a couple of years ago, he says, look, people pushed me to go in and take over Gaza, but I knew that it wasn't the right thing, because if I go in there, I get stuck there. And then I
Right.
take my eye off the real ball, which is Iran and Hezbollah. And those are the bigger issues. So I had to stay focused, and I
Mhm.
couldn't be distracted. I mean, he was too focused on the other fronts, and he totally lost sight of what was happening in Gaza. So with that as the state of mind, you start to think of other ways that you can deter them, that you can kick the can down the road, that you can prevent war from coming. One way you do that is economic incentives. One of the big problems that everyone around the world faces when it comes to terrorist organizations is where is their center of power? What asset do they have that if you take it away, it takes away their desire to want to fight? So if you look at a country, countries, definitely Western countries, we value our people, right? First and foremost. So if you, God forbid, accidentally, or not accidentally, intentionally kill lots of our people, that is what will upset us. You take out our power plants, our nuclear reactors, our ports, right? We have key strategic economic assets. We have military bases that, if destroyed, they weaken and undermine our abilities. Terrorists, what do they have, right? They don't have power plants. They don't have ports. They don't have military bases. So what asset do they have that if you remove it, it will take away that desire? So usually there's only one. It's called the leaders. Kill the leaders. And that's why you see all over the world for decades, there's an attempt to eliminate the leaders of terrorist organizations. America did that with bin Laden, with al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, and on and on and on. Israel has done that also over the years against Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas and other groups that it has fought with. But that's the one power base that you can look to. But also what you could try to do, and Israel tried this, is create other incentives for them to prefer quiet. So you can do that, especially in a place like Gaza, which is really a desolate place and without real economic prosperity, is try to create some economic incentives. So that's how the Qatari money came into being. Ask the Qataris to send every month $30 million, hopefully give a boost to the local economy, get that money into the hands and pockets of the regular people on the streets of Gaza. And then they will say to Hamas, no, life is good now. We finally have a little cash. Don't go to war against Israel. Start allowing Palestinian workers to come from Gaza into Israel every day. Let them make an Israeli salary, which is 4 or 5 times what they can make in the Gaza Strip, if not more. So that starts to provide for 500,000 people in Gaza, just with 20,000 people who are working in Israel. And that makes life a little better. So Israel believed, wow, that could work. That could buy us quiet, literally. The second leg to this was, okay, we need to stay focused, like I said, on Iran and Hezbollah. We're using the economic track. It's reaping some benefit. But let's also make sure we have the right technology in place that can keep us safe. So technology number one, Iron Dome. Hamas wants to fire a rocket, we'll blow it out of the sky. It won't bother us. And therefore, it's a nuisance. It's like a pest. It's a mosquito you just want to hit and swat. But it's not something that needs to draw me into a war. I can contain. They got their rockets. They don't bother me. Let them have them, right? I can shoot them out of the sky. Then in 2014, Hamas starts popping out of tunnels inside Israel, kills some Israeli soldiers. Israel says, okay, no problem. We got this. We're going to build an underground wall. We're going to build a system that can detect where they're digging a tunnel and when they're digging a tunnel. Then we could destroy it before they even use it. So again, the technology gave us this sense of security. So we have the illusion that we're safe. We have the money that's buying us quiet. And anyhow, we're prioritizing other fronts. That is what creates a policy of containment.
So that technology that could detect tunnel building, was that just along the border? Or again, I go, why didn't they know there was like this huge underground tunnel system being built?
They definitely knew. And
Did
that's
they
the
just
thing.
think
I
it
mean,
was like bunkers for the
right.
people?
So
Like,
they
what
knew,
did they think was going on?
they knew that under every house, every building, there's a tunnel. But
Mhm.
here's the thing. So, they could see people going into tunnels because they're watching them with drones or satellites all the time. But the issue was they never thought to try to get their hands on what the maps or to,
Mhm.
see what these routes of these tunnels are.
Right.
Because in Israel's mind, because of that whole policy of containment we just spoke about, all we really have to care about are the tunnels that might cross into Israel. The tunnels they
Right.
got in there, those we have to care about only when there's a war. We know that Hamas will go down in there and then it'll be harder to get to them. But otherwise, it doesn't really bother us. No one in their mind ever would have imagined that they would abduct 251 people and be hiding them inside those tunnels in Gaza. So when Israel goes into Gaza at the end of October of 2023, a few weeks after the attack, they have no idea where these tunnels lead to. So even if you see a hatch, and this is just important to understand, even if you have a hatch that comes out of someone's bedroom, where does it lead to? And you can't just bomb it because
Ugh.
who's in there? Are there hostages? Does the
Yeah.
tunnel that then proceeds from that hatch, Does it go under a hospital or under a school? And if I bomb this tunnel, do I capsize now a hospital potentially? I mean, so what do you have to do? You have to send robots or soldiers through these tunnels. You have to map them out, see where they go, who's in there, what's on the other side, and only then can you start to deal with destroying them. That's why almost 2 years into this war, Bridget, we've only destroyed about 50% of the tunnels under Gaza. And we're talking about tunnels that are the size of the New York subway and the London Underground put together.
Wow.
Hundreds and hundreds of miles of tunnels.
I mean, this is the thing that the tunnel chapter is terrifying in your book. It just gives me claustrophobia reading it. It's just like this is the other thing. I think I had this guy John Spencer on to talk about urban warfare, and
Yeah.
he talked about warfare in Gaza, and he was like, people don't understand jack shit about urban warfare, particularly somewhere like Gaza that has an entire city underground tunnel system, basically. And that seems, it's just wild that they were, again, it's just like you would think they'd be building kind of bunkers for the people in the event that they did have to go to, there just doesn't seem to be any concern for the Palestinian people at all. I feel like they just get the shit end of the stick and all of this deal, and then
Unfortunately, you're 100% right.
then
They
there's this idea too, like you touched on this, there's no concept that 250 hostages would be taken into these tunnels. Talk about this conceptia. I'm so obsessed with this idea because I've seen it in action in my own life. In real time, I witnessed a shooting, and this is, I don't even know if it's really the same, but based on just so many people I've talked to, um, it is, I witnessed a shooting. It was broad daylight, and it was in Los Angeles when I was living there. This kid came out of an alley. Another kid followed him. They were like gang kids, I find out later, but it was like bang, 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 shooting in
Wow.
the opposite direction. They start running. And it was like 5 PM in a pretty quiet part of Santa Monica. And I was like, I immediately my brain starts going, that was just kids. They were playing with cap guns. I know what gunshots sound like. I knew it was a shooting that I had just witnessed, and my brain immediately started lying to me in that moment, and I kept driving. I even drove down the alley to see if anybody was there, and nobody, which
You
was
went
not
looking
probably
for
that
trouble.
smart. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just was like, "Was that a shoot?" Like, I was just so in, like, it was crazy how quickly, and I kept hearing stories about this, of a woman who Hamas is literally invading the kibbutz, and she's making coffee. Her whole family, I heard this from a survivor of the, I think it was, Barry.
Mhm.
She was talking about how her whole family was in the safe room, and they're like, it was her mother-in-law or something. They're like, "Get in here," and she was just in complete denial about what was happening around her. And they're firing rockets and gunshots outside their door, and terrorists setting things on fire, and she's literally making coffee and just sweeping like nothing. She's like, "What are you talking about? Nothing's happening." I heard from people at Nova who were like, they couldn't, these are soldiers, people who've been in wars, been in battles, but because they were in Israel, they were like, this can't be they just couldn't believe that it was happening. That is the Israeli concept that this could not possibly happen was so deeply ingrained in every single person. It, as it was happening, people were not able to comprehend that it was happening. That was the thing that was so striking to me.
Look, I think that the idea, this conceptia, right? And it's not, there's no real one word that can translate it into English because concept, it's a play on that word. But it's this idea, it's a mindset, it's a state of mind, it's a paradigm, or I think even maybe better, a prism through which I look at everything. So I tell myself a story. And the story that I tell myself is that Hamas does not want war. Hamas wants economic prosperity. I also tell myself that Hamas can't really do anything to me because I have my technology, so I'm safe. And therefore, anyone who tells me to the contrary, it's hard for me to break out of the concepcia. And we detail, for example, stories in the book going back to even 2016 when there was suddenly a defense minister who didn't have a military background. This guy, Vigdor Lieberman, Moldovan born, had moved to Israel many years ago. And he comes into the office in the defense ministry and sees what's happening in Gaza. This is 2016, and writes an 11-page report where literally he calls out one-to-one what's going to happen eventually. He says if Hamas is not dealt with now, within a few years, we will have an attack the likes of basically what happened on October 7th.
Wow.
We have the story of what are called in Hebrew the tatzpitaniot, the female soldiers, the surveillance soldiers who sit in their bases along the border, and they watch screens, which are with cameras showing what's happening on the border, just over the border inside Gaza. And their job, the joke always was, and I've been to these bases, if they saw a bee fly by, they would notice it, right? I mean,
people need to understand too that they are responsible for one specific area. It's like you get assigned to a station and it is one specific area that is the only area you're ever responsible for. So they know it inside and out.
A mile on a half a mile. That's about it. I mean, we're not talking anything too dramatic. And it's, do you see anyone moving? Do you see anyone coming too close to the fence? Do you see people with guns? Do you see people digging a tunnel? Those are the kind of things you're looking for. And they're warning their commanders over a period of months that they're seeing things that they're not used to seeing. They're seeing higher level Hamas guys come near the border. They're seeing training taking place near the border. And their commanders are saying to them, you don't understand. It's nothing. It's not a big deal, because their commanders were so deeply entrenched within the concepcia that they could not break free of it. And that's why I like this line that Donald Rumsfeld famously said. He was the Secretary of Defense, now Secretary of War, in the U.S. back in 9/11 in the George W. Bush administration, when he said about 9/11 about the Al Qaeda, it wasn't a lack of information; it was a lack of imagination. We knew all this stuff, but we couldn't break free of the concepcia, of the state of mind, which started at the top with the political echelon and trickled all the way down through the intelligence commanders, through the generals, all the way to the soldier at the bottom.
And there was that one woman who did the border surveillance who was really pushing back, and is some of it just like Israeli machismo? Like, is some of this just ego and hubris and male, like,
I mean, there's some of that.
listening to the women soldiers?
There probably is a dose of sexism involved here, that, these girls, these women don't know what they're talking about.
These hysterics.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting emotional, right? Women love to hear that, right? No, I
calm down.
Exactly. That always works with my wife, to calm down. No. I think that's part of it. Look, that's part of it. However, I think what there was, because it wasn't just when it came to the female soldiers. It wasn't just when these analysts were making their warnings. It was everything that they were seeing.
Right.
And you saw it even in the night between October 6th and October 7th, that there were alarm bells going off. Our intelligence agency started to see things that were happening on the ground in Gaza, and still they couldn't put the pieces together. And that wasn't because of some young female soldier who was telling them something. This was coming at the highest levels of intelligence. And still the puzzle was too complex, and they couldn't imagine what was really coming to happen. And they thought it's a drill. And if it's not a drill, at the worst case, maybe they'll cross in the border at one or two different spots. But what ended up happening was it definitely wasn't a drill. And then it ended up crossing the border at 60 plus different places, blowing holes in the fence. I mean, this was a massive invasion that Israel was just completely taken by surprise with.
Now, why didn't you hear all these horrific text messages and stories in the WhatsApp chats and like, where's the army? Where's the army? And I think actually even Charlie Kirk, rest in peace, was saying like the whole country is basically the military. Why did it take so long for the army to get there? Was again, the conspiracy theorists would ask, like, was there a stand down order or something? What was it? Or was it just that they were so completely overwhelmed in so many spots, as you just mentioned, it was too much? I don't fully understand what
There,
happened
there,
there.
there was not a stand down order. There was an order overnight by the chief of staff not to do anything in a way along the border that would show Hamas that Israel knew or had some indication that Hamas might be preparing something. Because
And why was that? What's the rationale behind
right, and
this?
that, by the way, it was a terrible decision, and that decision cost the country with thousands of people, and dragged us into this war. I don't know that changing that decision would have completely stopped the attack, but it would have definitely made it very, very different. The debate that night was whether do we, based on what we're seeing, is this a drill or is this an attack, like we said before? Now, if it's a drill, so basically, let me step back. If you have this debate, you kind of have three things that you could potentially do. One is do nothing because you don't know. So keep things as they are. You got some soldiers along the border. They're there anyhow. If something happens, they'll be ready because they're always supposed to be ready. That's just the way they are. Number two is you could beef up your forces, send down reinforcements, get everybody to flood the zone. Everybody gets up, throw helicopters in the air, drones in the air, tanks are up in their positions, turn on the floodlights and say, hey, Hamas, we know what you're doing. Don't you dare, right? Option three is to try to find some balance in between. And that's kind of what the chief of staff tried to do. So what he said to his subordinates was, try to get a little ready in case, God forbid, something happens, but don't do anything that they will see that you know that they might be planning something. Now, why would he not want them to? Why would we not want Hamas to see that we might know that they're doing something? Because that would undermine your intelligence sources. So we are listening to them. We're intercepting phone calls. We have sensors and cameras and different detection devices all throughout the place. And we can see and hear what they're planning. And if then we do that in a big way, we say, hey guys, we're here, don't you dare. They'll be like, how do they know something? And then
Mm,
they'll go back to the room where they might have been speaking and look for the bug. Or they'll pick
mm,
up their phone and they'll be like, okay, we can't trust these phones anymore. They've now clearly Israel's watching and listening.
right.
So
So it's like you burn yourself
you burn your sources.
because it might just be a drill
It might
because,
just be a
by
drill
the way, they've been doing drills
all the time.
for
Exactly.
years. It's like they were like it almost is like they were just desensitizing.
They were trying to normalize
Right.
for Israel what they ultimately would go out and do. So what that was why nothing was done in that night to try to potentially prevent it. But then when we get to the attack itself, so Israel is not prepared for this huge flood that's coming across the border. But what Hamas does is low tech in how they cross in, but also very sophisticated. So they've learned and they've studied the Israeli military positions on the border for a long time. And they know a couple of things. First of all, they know that when there's a massive missile barrage, all the soldiers go into the safe areas. So they go into secure rooms, concrete slabs or whatever it is. Or they go into the underground bomb shelters in their bases. So they launch right away a massive, massive, massive salvo of rockets, thousands right away. And that sends everyone in the borderline positions into those safe areas. So
Mm,
they're not out in their positions now. Now they're in the safe areas. Then they quickly storm the border, just a couple of them, not too many, a few dozen. They blow holes in the fences in different points along the border because they know now soldiers are not going to really be watching them because of the rockets. And right away, when they get in, right away, where do they go? They go to the frontline positions and they cut the communications and the cameras and the sensors. At the same time, they take drones, very low tech drones, like the ones you could buy at Target or Best Buy, attach a little explosive device to them, and they drop those on the cameras that are lining the border. So
It's
suddenly what
crazy.
ends up happening is Israel's got no eyes on the border.
Right.
And now its bases, these little frontline positions, suddenly can't even talk to one another. Definitely can't talk to headquarters in Tel Aviv. At some point, even, they get to the main Gaza division headquarters at a base called Re'im. This is the base where you're supposed to manage everybody from. They infiltrate that base. So even though the commander of the division is there inside his command center, he's got two big issues right now. One is his base is under attack, right? He has terrorists inside his base. That's one. So he's got to fight to push them out and reconquer his base. Number two, because of what the attacks on the communications, he can't even really communicate with any of the forces on the border, and definitely not
Yeah.
with Tel Aviv either. So you got the generals in Tel Aviv, you got the people on the border fighting for their lives, and this creates chaos. And no one can tell what's happening. So, like, a lot of people say, where was the Air Force? Why didn't they just come? And unfortunately, and I met pilots who, for example, in those initial hours, were boarded their planes or helicopters and were sent out to the Mediterranean to protect the gas fields that we have there, because like they thought maybe they'd come under attack. But no, we didn't need the gas fields protected. We needed you to stand on the border and mow down anyone who was trying to cross. But there
Right.
was no one to direct them to that because nobody fully understood
What
what
was
was
happening?
happening. And unfortunately, it took hours, literally hours, to figure this out. And there were places, you mentioned Kibbutz Be'eri, Kibbutz near Oz, where one out of every 4 residents was either murdered or abducted on October 7th. By the time the IDF got there, Hamas was already gone.
Yeah.
There was no one to
Th
fight.
that's like the Nahal
Same thing in
base.
Nahal Oz Bay.
That base it was tragic.
Yeah.
Just what happened to the soldiers and the girls, and, yeah, there just no it seemed completely chaotic, and then, like you said with the Air Force, I know quite a few people who have brought up this idea of the Hannibal Directive. It's this idea I see your face right now, you're like, "I know where you're going with this," which is basically that the IDF mode it killed most of the people on October 7th, and it was the Air Force. Now, in your book, you do talk about, I believe there's one story of a guy who because a lot of the guys were wearing IDF, like they were also dressed like soldiers, a
Yeah.
lot of the terrorists. It sounds like insane.
No,
And then they
yeah.
were taking hostages.
The Hannibal procedure, as it's called, is very controversial. But basically, what it refers to, first of all, it's just a terrible name, anyhow. But
Yeah,
what it refers to is if you see a soldier being abducted, um, and you have tried to save him or her, and you can't, then you do everything possible to shoot to prevent that soldier from being taken, even if it means that you might be killing that soldier. Right? Very controversial. Controversial in Israel, let alone anywhere else in the world. On October 7th, there were some instances of where the Hannibal procedure was called and was put into effect. But this is a complete lie. And I do hear this also from people, that it was Israel who killed most of the people. It was Israel who, killed the hostages. It was Israel this, Israel that. That's not what happened. There were some instances of friendly fire. Look, it's chaos. It's a war. You see people moving on a path in a kibbutz, you're accidentally going to open fire. There were cases of where they also attacked cars that they saw were taking terrorists back. Sometimes they weren't sure, is there a hostage in there or is there not? And there were hostages in there. And these are terrible tragedies. But this is not what was responsible for the death of 1,200 people on that day. This isn't what led to 251 people being taken hostage, right? This was Hamas that did this.
when was the Hannibal procedure called on that day?
No, there was one instance, for example, I forget exactly which person it was who was in the kibbutz, but there was a car, a sedan that had been taken from the kibbutz. What they did is they crossed a lot of them on foot or on motorbikes, but then when they got to the kibbutzim, people had their cars there.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm sure you've seen those images. They
Yeah.
even, like, they took hostages in golf carts that, like, elderly women would drive
Yeah.
around the kibbutz, right? They drove those back to Gaza, but they also took people's Jeeps and they took people's sedans. So they filled them up with some terrorists and some hostages, and they started driving through the fields back to Gaza. At some point, when the IDF did have the opportunity, in some cases, it did open fire. There's a terrible incident that happened in Kibbutz Be'eri, where there were hostages who were inside a home, and there were Hamas terrorists who were holding them hostage inside this home, and a commander gave an order to shoot a tank shell at this house, right? I mean, extremely, extremely controversial, but very difficult to judge in that moment what is
And it's
happening.
funny one of the things that I did learn too is, like, when you hear commander, you think of an old man, and it's like a 22-year-old kid, often.
Sometimes it's 20 at the oldest. We're talking about someone maybe 40 at the
Yeah,
oldest.
I mean, it's usually I always think I hear commander and you think of, like, the movies and a guy with a beard and a mustache, and he's in
Right.
his 60s, and it's like, I can't tell you how many commanders I met that were, like, 35.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's a very young military with a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of very young people, and that's a result of how our national service is structured, with a compulsory service that every 18-year-old man, woman is supposed to serve in the military.
So did the yeah, that's crazy. I can't even imagine having to, like, make those decisions in real time. It just it really does seem like a complete breakdown of it's like the worst case, and I think you say this in your book, just it is a case of everything going wrong at once. Just every bad thing happened at the same time.
It's 100%. It's literally everything bad happening, and even when the bad happens, the difficulty in kind of recouping and getting back on our feet, it took way too long.
Mm. You mean after the attack?
After the attack, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the if you look at the layers of what Israel was supposed to have in place, so first is intelligence, that failed you. Second were your safety mechanisms, your fence, your barriers, that failed you. Third were your soldiers who were deployed along the border, who are always there, they failed you. But
Mhm.
fourth are supposed to be, okay, send the reinforcements, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and you ended up hearing these amazing stories of random Israelis who were home because it was a holiday and it was a Sabbath, it was Shabbat, and people just took their sidearms and drove down south to try to save lives. Some of these people were killed,
Yeah.
but other people, you know, were heroes and saved people. Went down to the Nova Music Festival and just picked up people to get them out of the fields and out of the killing zones. I mean, that's one of the incredible parts of the story, is just the bravery and courage of the regular, average, normal Israelis who just said, "I hear there's something bad happening. I'm going."
Yep. There were a lot of those stories. The Bedouins who were like
Yeah,
heroes in these stories who hid people and I
one
it
hundred
it,
percent.
it is yeah. It's did you go down there in the immediate aftermath?
Not that day. No,
Well, not
no.
that day, but as a reporter, were you
I
drawn
went
to
there several days later. Once they were allowing journalists into the kibbutzim, I went down to tour the kibbutzim, and it was, yeah, these are images you'll never forget. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
the I was there one day when they were still pulling bodies out of homes,
Mhm.
um, and out of nearby fields. There was one image that will always stay with me in near Oz, and I'm just walking through the paths of the kibbutz, and these homes are very modest. This a kibbutz is like a socialist kind of way of
It's like an
living.
ashram.
Yeah. No, very, like, just like little structures, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, little living room, like nothing fancy at all. Very simple way of life, but very beautiful way of life. And people have a bunch of kids, and there was this one house that I'm walking by in the back of the house, and there's a chair outside on the grass right beneath a window into the house, and the window's open. So I go over to look at the window, see why is there a chair here, and I look inside, and it's a kid's bedroom, and there's a bunk bed in there, and the chair is outside. I still don't know what, but the mattress of the bottom bunk covered in blood.
Mm.
And I didn't even want to ask what happened there.
Mm.
I didn't want to know.
Mm.
You can only imagine. I don't. Was
Yeah.
it a
Yeah.
terrorist? Is
I
it a
think I
father?
know
Is it a mother? Is it
exactly
a kid?
this.
I just
Yeah.
I did not want to know at that point. And it's just because your mind, it just can only imagine the
Yeah.
horror of what these people went through, and the abandonment that they felt. Where were we? Where
Mhm.
was the IDF?
Mhm.
Where is Israel? And they were on their own, and there was no one there to come save them.
Mhm. I know. Yep. I'm very grateful you wrote this book. It's, I know it's fun. It's interesting too, like those images. My husband had to drag me out of bed and be like, "You have a family." Because I was up on night and that night and I saw it breaking on social media. So, and I took in all before they scrubbed it all and got rid of. I took in all of the like horrific stuff that was coming out that Hamas was live streaming.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm like, I don't even think Israel knows what's happening yet. Like, I was like, I feel like Israel hasn't even woken up to like what's going on because in some ways they were live streaming this and it was like you were watching something unfolding and people were going, where's the army? And the army hadn't even arrived yet because it was hours and hours and hours before and I just, it was like post 9/11 for me. Like I couldn't I couldn't like stop myself from I don't know why. I was just I knew and then seeing the world's reaction to it immediately before Israel had done anything, I was like, "Oh shit." Like, this is gonna break everything. I actually said to my husband, I said, "This is going to break the world," because
Yeah.
I knew that there would have to be a response, and I knew that those images that are equally horrific coming out of Gaza, some of which are absolutely real, some of which are Syrian children that no one gave a shit about. I was also obsessed with Syria because I was like, "This is fucking horrific," what they were doing to their own people. So um, yeah, I just had that I said it to my husband. I was like, "This is gonna break everything," and now here we are 2 years later, and it feels like it's just you see this, like, unfolding, um but what was so crazy to me was just the the imagery for some reason coming out that it's just like this weird thing where Hamas will be like, "We're live streaming this. This is us. We did it." And certain people in the world will be like, "This was Israel." I'm like, "You guys took this agency away from you." Like they said they did it. They live streamed it. It's I don't know. What are your feelings about what are your feelings about obviously the anti-Israel sentiment is high right now in the world. I think the UN just yesterday labeled it a genocide. What are your feelings
Well, I
about
mean, I
things?
think you said it well, right? That you had riots and protests against Israel that were starting on October 7th, right?
Yeah.
The day that the most Jews were killed on a single day since the Holocaust. We're at our weakest moment, and everyone's coming out of the woodwork because they're smelling Jewish blood and they want more. And I think that is so. When we look at this, we have to understand that there is a deep uh, kind of layer of anti-Semitism that exists that we have to break free of, and we find it in politics and in media and just on the streets and in regular places, and that feeds into some of these narratives, which a lot of them, I think, some are right, some are listen, mistakes are made, and criticism is often needed, but claims of genocide, famine, um, a lot of this I feel is, when you have people walking down the streets saying, chanting intifada, do they not understand what they're chanting at Columbia University? Right? Do they not realize that they're calling for the murder of people? And yeah, free speech is great, but what is happening here? Right? When
Yeah.
When university presidents, like we saw at Congress, can't come out and condemn students who on their campuses are chanting these kind of things, there's something wrong. And
Yeah.
so I think that, this political isolation that Israel now finds itself facing, some of it we might have been able to avoid with some better decisions, with some better planning. But for the most part, tragically, it's out there today. The demon's out of the bottle, or the
Ugh.
genie's out of the bottle. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was talking to a man and he said, and so it begins again, just so ominously. And it's like, it's really truly like zombie. It is like, and normal people will be kind of infected by this. And they'll be like, Candace Owen says, totally in earnest. They'll start a sentence that way. And I'm like, oh no, I was saying this is like, you're in a bunker somewhere and some member in your party pulls up their sleeve and you're like, oh shit, you've been bit by a zombie. Like, it's like you're in a zombie apocalypse and some
Right.
people all around you are getting bit. And I don't, or it's I see it happening on the right now, like in our politics. Like it's really wild. I'm like, what? It's like a sinkhole. It's like swallowing people up. And I don't, the only logical explanation for it, even right now, looking at this Charlie Kirk thing, and then I'll wind down with you. That the left, the right has the ability to be like, this was a left-wing killer. This is a guy who we know he was a leftist. He was that you should be all hands on deck attacking the left and saying this is an ideology we need to put to rest. Let's unite. And instead they're obsessed with Israel. Like, I'm like, I don't know what's happening right now. This is craziness.
It's crazy.
It's
Yeah, some
crazy.
of it is crazy.
So
And
the
again,
only logical explanation, though, the only thing that makes any sense, and when I look at it from that perspective, is some weird anti-Semitism like mind virus that takes over a population like every 100 years, I guess, or something. Like I don't understand it. I really don't. It's baffling to me. And I pray for you.
well, I appreciate that. And you know what? If I could just say, it's not just prayers that I think prayers are good, but moral clarity is important. And I think I feel that you have that, and I think that that's what we do need. Is we need people who can see the truth for what it is. And again, it's complicated, and Israel
Yeah,
makes mistakes, and it's not going to be black or white, and you have to be 100% one way or 100% the other way. You're allowed to have nuance in life and
right.
allowed to see some gray. But the delegitimization, demonization, the double standard that is always applied to Israel, that takes away the ability to have that nuance. So
Right.
moral clarity, I found, is something that is so desperately missing today, and is something that the more people speak about, the more people recognize, that's what can make a big difference.
What is your biggest defect of character?
I'm a little impulsive at times.
Really?
That could be, yeah. So I'd like to make decisions and move on with things. Sometimes it's good
Mm,
to pause, think about things. So
yeah.
I try I try to think more.
What is your biggest asset?
Mm. Um, I'd like to think that I'm a good storyteller,
You are a good storyteller.
and that I can do that in the written word, and also I can do it speaking. And I love telling stories, and I think that's a good asset.
Yeah, I think we need a new story about the Middle East than the one we've all been telling ourselves, which is that it's just always doomed to be at war with each other.
100%. Amen.
Well, where can we find you online? And your book is available anywhere books are available.
Book is available anywhere. I have a website, yaakovkatz.com. You can follow me on X, Yaakov Katz. That's where I'm mostly on Instagram and other places, but mostly on X, like other journalists. And it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.